This photo is circa 1926, I believe.
Okay, so we're
Moorish architecture.
Erica, we're live now, and
we are.
Okay, looks like we've got 25 or so participants. Yeah,
we had 133 registrants, so that's
okay.
Pretty good.
Okay, let's wait a couple minutes as people trickle in, and then we can get started. My name is Drew McDaniel, and on behalf of our organizers, Lower Polk Neighbors, Lower Polk Community Benefit District, Discover Polk Community Benefit District, and Russian Hill Neighbors, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's District 3 Supervisorial Candidate Forum. Our moderator tonight is Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez from KQED, where he's a reporter and a digital producer. Previously, he was a reporter and columnist for The Examiner. Joe grew up in San Francisco and has been covering the city practically nonstop since interviewing former Mayor Willie Brown for his middle school newspaper at the age of 12. On a personal note, since I moved to the city, I've frequently referred to Joe's work to learn about the history, issues, and personalities that make San Francisco such a fascinating, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating place. So he's a great resource, and I think he's going to facilitate a really interesting discussion tonight. The next 90 minutes will be broken up into two parts. First, you'll hear each candidate engage in a 10-minute one-on-one conversation with our moderator. After each 10-minute block, the other three candidates will have 2 minutes each to respond. After all four candidates have gone, we'll enter a lightning round where Joe will pose more pointed questions and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. I will be keeping time, and I'll jump in to remind Joe and the candidates when they have 30 seconds remaining, 10 seconds remaining, and when time is up. We'll give the candidates a short grace period when time is up to finish their thoughts, but after that, we'll use the mute button and move on to the next candidate or question. Profanity or inappropriate language will also force us to mute the speaker and move on. I'm sure that won't happen, but just keep that in mind. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, let's get on to the main event. After randomly ordering our four candidates, Mr. Sauter will go first, followed by Supervisor Peskin, then Ms. Schwartz, and finally Mr. Simonsen last. Okay, so Joe, take it away.
All right. Hey, Drew, thank you for such a gracious intro. I really do appreciate that. You know, we have a number of questions posited by the Lower Polk and Russian Hill groups that are our hosts tonight. But the overarching theme is the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has exposed and amplified so many of the city's chronic problems: housing, homelessness, transit, even access to public spaces. I mean, do we have access to streets, parks, and how? And the difficulties of running a small business have been completely exacerbated. Long simmering problems have become full-blown crises in 2020. So as the pandemic continues and eventually subsides, it's clear we can't go back to business as usual. So what do we do? What does District 3 in particular do? What do these neighborhoods do to look forward to a post-COVID world and survive? And how do we get there? Those are the point of the questions tonight. Those are the questions I'm going to pose to all of you and the questions coming from the neighborhoods. So first we are starting with Mr. Danny Sauter. Danny, hello.
Hi, Joe. Happy to be here.
Great, fantastic. And I thought because, you know, you have made such a point of this in your campaign, we would center your questions around your fireside portion around something you've made much hay about, businesses, small businesses. And you have said that, you know, we need to simplify processes for small businesses to move forward, right?
Absolutely. It's been a major point of ours in the campaign.
But if we have Prop H, if we have the mayor's measure to really simplify things, what else can be done? What further can be done? What where do we take it next?
Yeah, well, Prop H is a good start, and I've been very vocal in supporting Prop H. And for those listening tonight, I hope you do your research and vote yes on Prop H. It's a very common sense measure to streamline some of our small business openings. But we need to realize that this has been a problem for years, and it is a real area of contrast. In 2018, as Supervisor Peskin was telling the media that things were, quote, very healthy in our retail corridors, I was out there going door to door with our other neighborhood groups and actually looking at 400 commercial spaces to understand where the vacancies in our neighborhood were and maybe why they were happening and what we could do about them. And what we found through that research and what I am advocating for to this day is to make it easier for small businesses to open up in our neighborhoods.
Sure,
and
but specifics, please. Past Prop H, specifics. What can be done?
Of course. And I should mention on Prop H, my opponent, Supervisor Peskin, has been reluctant to support it. As of last week, he had no endorsement. This morning in the Chronicle, he supports it. I hope that is the truth. I hope that's the case. Beyond that, though, Prop H doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough to change uses that are allowed in District 3. So, for example, a pop-up in District 3 is currently illegal. A mixed-use space is currently illegal. If you want to open a coffee shop and a bookstore under one roof, that's illegal. Those are the types of really flexible businesses that are actually feasible in an economic climate like this, and the types of businesses I think that will bring some vibrancy to District 3.
And there was a question we had from one of our neighborhood groups tonight that they were hoping to lure different types of businesses that don't currently exist on Polk Street. Neighborhood serving businesses is the way they phrased it. Certainly Polk is a bit of a destination for folks to come hang out. What more can be done to make it a place for people who live there? How do you entice those businesses to come in, especially in a pandemic world when they're so difficult to operate now?
Yeah. Well, I love that effort. It's something I've done in my own neighborhood. We did a study to see what people thought was missing, particularly in North Beach. And, that's an exercise I think we should do all around District 3. And then from that, as a supervisor and working with our partners like OEWD, going to those small businesses, going to those companies and recruiting them. That is a role that a supervisor absolutely should play. I've heard in North Beach specifically, there's been requests for help, there's been requests for small and medium grocery stores, whatever it is, whether it's on Russian Hill or on Lower Polk, that's the kind of work I want to do.
Well, you say recruit, but is it as easy as making a phone call? I mean, what enticements do you make, especially in a post-pandemic world? I mean, people are going to be short on capital, they're short on investors. It's not going to be a really great time to open a business. What specifics do you have to help people make sure businesses can actually open?
Yeah, well, part of it is absolutely recruiting and showing very visibly that District 3 is open for business. I think that's a good place to start, but you're right, there's got to be more. And that's where I think grants come in. We were in a conversation earlier about the role that grants could play in Chinatown, for example, to lessen the risk to get some of those businesses and restaurants out onto the street, into the shared spaces. The grants have a real role to play here. And again, the zoning does too. If someone looks at District 3 and the reputation of District 3 being a really difficult place to open a business, the status quo of being 1 to 2 years to open something that should be as simple as a cafe, they're going to choose a different neighborhood. So we need to rewrite that brand that District 3 has right now.
Well, I think it's interesting you bring up grants. I mean, they can be a real balancing act, right? Because, when the Central Subway was disturbing the pedestrian areas around small businesses in Chinatown, for instance, they sought grants, and Supervisor Peskin helped them get some funding in order to kind of help them out. But there's a balancing act because the budget isn't infinite. So where do you cut? Where do you find the funding to make grants for small businesses happen?
Yeah, well, I think that's where you've got to work with both neighborhood associations, with CBDs, and with companies that are, have a real incentive to invest in that neighborhood. I was on a walk this past week in the Lower Polk area with a neighbor, and we were, just kind of walking slowly and just looking at all the organizations, certainly universities, private clubs in that neighborhood that have incredible financial capital, and just thinking together about how, it's in their best interest to fund, whether it's for small businesses, or we were talking a lot about street cleanup, fund some of those services. So that's the role I want to play as a supervisor, is to work hand in hand with our established organizations and institutions to help them do their part to support the neighborhoods too.
And what can be done now? I mean, we're seeing so many businesses suffering. We're seeing so many businesses really facing an incredibly tough time.
Yeah.
We don't have enough grants for all of them, certainly, and they've sought pandemic loans, and the pandemic loans aren't always given out to smaller businesses. Certainly, they've favored larger corporations. What can be done to help businesses that are struggling right now?
Right now, it's got to be every single resource that the city has. It's got to be extreme flexibility from the city. You know, I know there's been small businesses that have had good success with shared spaces where they're approved quickly, but I can tell you just about as many other ones that were waiting for weeks to do bigger closures. So, you know, we've got to do so much more as a city. This is not necessarily short term, but long term, I want to have a much more robust team of small business advisors working out of City Hall so that every small business has a point person at City Hall to actually get some of these issues fixed and be someone that's looking out for them for PPP loans, for grants, for future opportunities.
Are you suggesting reforming the Office of Economic Workforce Development? Because they certainly are that point person. That's kind of what they do. Do you think
that's absolutely the role, but building out that team, right? So there's not necessarily that particular mechanism within OEWD at the moment. That would be something I would work to build out.
That's interesting. And who do you think needs that help first? Who when you look at the landscape of D3, who is hurting the most right now? Who needs help first?
It's restaurants, it's immigrant-owned businesses, it is businesses owned by people of color. It is the people that for many years have been on the margins in San Francisco. And, you know, this is a tired line by now, but it's just this pandemic that has pushed those existing disparities into focus. So it's absolutely got to start there. District 3 is an amazingly diverse set of neighborhoods. So anything we do, whether it's small business support, community ambassadors, they have to be hired and deployed in a way that reflects the diversity of District 3. You know, that definitely has to be bilingual support, particularly in Chinatown.
Yeah, we've certainly seen some failures around that in the past. I've heard from a number of Chinatown neighbors who've said that they have had very poor bilingual support. We've heard from a lot of businesses that they want, certainly not uniformly. I mean, I was just reading something from on the bold italic from a tenderloin business. It's a bar that said that they understand why they shouldn't have to open right away. But some businesses have been saying we need to open sooner. Gyms had been pushing for months to reopen, for instance, and had been pushed off. Are we reopening at the right speed? And do you think businesses need to be able to open their doors faster, sooner?
Mm-hmm. I think the speed has been okay. It's more so the communication and the expectations that I think we may have mishandled a little bit. The examples of gyms is really a good example. They had just a few days notice when they were finally able to open. We've seen, similar, certainly not businesses, but with playgrounds, so many families asking, just keep us informed. When are the playgrounds opening? What is the science behind it? I think by and large, San Franciscans understand the science. They respect the science. They just want that communication, and I think that's really where we may have misstepped a little bit. Yeah.
Well, and who do you fault that to? And we're coming up on time, just to let you know. But last word in, who do we fault that to?
Sure. I mean, that is many different departments, but as a supervisor, that's something you've got to do is go and fight for your small businesses, go and fight for your.
All right. Thank you so much, Danny, and sorry to keep us a little quick to time. All right. Now for our response section, Aaron, you have 2 minutes. You can pick up any one of those threads, whether we're helping small businesses enough now, opening speeds, how we help them in the future. It's a pretty open field.
Hold on. Everything is all about hitting unmute. Thank you, Joe. My name is Aaron Peskin, and thank you for the question about small business, which was really a question around streamlining. But it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. When I first became a supervisor, there was unanimous support from Russian Hill, from Telegraph Hill, from North Beach, from the business community in banning chain stores in the North Beach neighborhood commercial district. The Polk Street commercial district had a very different approach to that and wanted to actually have oversight about this. And that's called conditional use authority. But at the end of the day, when you are a supervisor and you're rooted in your community, you listen to the community and you create the right regulatory approach. And in this pandemic, which is what you're asking about, I have done that. And I've done that by introducing legislation and supporting legislation at the state level to prevent evictions, not only in residential properties, but in commercial properties. And we should not be afraid of regulating. It's very easy to say that I will rain down more money from the budget. And you just asked that question, Joe, which is, to the previous speaker, what compromises are you going to make? Or how are you going to generate new revenue and new sources of revenue? It's easy to run for office and say those things, but I'm actually the person who has balanced 13 out of 20 years of budgets in San Francisco on time and on budget. As a small business,
Aaron, as long as we are running short on time, but as long as I got you, Prop H, where do you stand on it?
Proposition H, let me just say this. Number
5
one,
seconds left.
I supported it long before Trisha Thadani wrote the article. But number 2, excluding people from the process.
Aaron,
is
sorry,
problematic.
it's 2 minutes. I'm gonna have to cut you there. But you can pick it back up in our little fireside chat in the next round.
I look forward to it.
Wonderful. Lulu, let's hear from you. You've got 2 minutes. Please chit chat as much as you'd like. Respond to Danny and respond to those proposals. How are we helping businesses in the now and post-pandemic?
Well, I don't think we're helping businesses at all. I mean, I'm over here in North Beach, where we are dependent on the restaurant, entertainment, and tourism businesses, and they are dead. They're just dead. And I mean, we can sit and talk about the budget, and we can talk about all these bureaucratic phenomena and what happens as a supervisor and all that kind of stuff. All well and good. I am for a shock therapy for our economy in this city. This city has been devastated by the virus. It's time for some shock therapy, and I think the first thing would be a 2-year moratorium on the bureaucratic process of getting a beer and wine license. I would like to see a 2-year temporary beer and wine license awarded to people who fill out a postcard with their name, their bank, their insurance company name, pay a $100 fee, get it notarized and send it in. I mean, we're not sitting here talking about a minor problem. We're not sitting here talking about any of the problems that exist in the past. We're talking about the death of our city. This is a city based on entertainment and tourism. And we have to really, frankly, I know that word is terribly radical. I mean, terribly dangerous to some people. We have to have radical economic therapy. We have to have a new economic policy that stresses being supportive to investment, and encouraging people to open the kind of businesses that will bring people back to our city. I would also like to add that I am for grants for homeless people to start cooperatives, because I work a great deal with homeless people as a trans activist. And I know a lot of homeless people have the skills to actually produce income. So I'm for grants for homeless people to start economic cooperatives. But I am not for a status solution that consists of everything being done by the municipal authorities. I am for aiding the entrepreneurs, supporting the entrepreneurs, clearing all the bureaucratic nonsense out of the way, and basically giving them the impetus to rebuild the tourist and entertainment infrastructure of our city.
All right, Lulu, thank you so much. I think that's our time. And just a reminder for all the candidates, Drew over there, if you look at Drew's window and have his window queued, he will be holding the timer there for you. All right, Mr. Simonsen, please. If you need a refresher on the question, or you pretty much got it?
I got it. Thanks for having me, Joe, and thanks for everyone else. Yeah, so small businesses is critical to San Francisco. It's critical to the character of our neighborhood. And I think we need to look beyond, as was mentioned, just an approach where we do grants or inject money. I think it really is looking to a holistic approach to small businesses. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We need to be using our small businesses to help our residents. And this is one thing that I constantly see San Francisco and City Hall not doing. We need to bring, for example, if we need to deliver meals to seniors, those meals should be delivered from San Francisco residents or from San Francisco restaurants. So we need to be making use of those resources. If we're doing transportation, those need to be provided by San Francisco companies. And so that's how we get our services back. That's how we support our small businesses without necessarily just writing grants. One of the other really interesting things that I think we have the opportunity to implement is by building new housing in new community areas. If we look at kind of the trends now after COVID, as far as office space and what that's going to look like, we're going to see a lot less use of our office space, especially in the downtown financial district. Those businesses down there are going to suffer. But we can actually make this into a win-win situation, because that's a lot of area and a lot of buildings that can be repurposed and reused for different things. The first thing that comes to mind is a huge area where we have a lack of housing. And so it'd be really interesting to kind of look into that and implement policies where we can revitalize a neighborhood by actually creating, not necessarily even doing any construction, but creating this housing.
Well, and you were talking a little bit about kind of leveraging kind of larger companies. Is that going to spook them off if we're raising funds off their backs, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think any company should be regulated and should have to pay their fair share of taxes, as well as CEOs and everything. So I don't think that should concern them if they're regulated just like any other industry.
Great. All right, we're gonna have to leave it there. All right, thank you so much. Well, that is our small business portion. If any of you have a little bit you want to pick up on, feel free to eat away from your time in future questions. Let's move on to our next section. We're gonna talk a little bit about housing and a little bit about neighborhood quality of life within that. Housing, homelessness, quality of life. And Aaron, we're going to start with you. A lot of these questions from the groups, Aaron, are around homelessness, around addressing homelessness. Frankly, I have several questions here that just seem to be from these groups being like, how do you address homelessness? And especially post-pandemic, you know, we're seeing the shelter system change. We're seeing safe sleeping sites outdoors. We're seeing hotels. How do we do this? What does addressing homelessness look like post-pandemic?
So let me start by saying this is not only a San Francisco problem, Joe. This is a national problem. It is a problem that is in every urban area. And before I drill down on that, let me just start by thanking the hosts of the Lower Polk neighbors that I helped create 20 years ago, the Lower Polk CBD. I was the author of the original legislation that created CBDs, the Discover Polk CBD, as well as the Russian Hill neighbors. Yourself, thank you for hosting this. But moving on to the issue at hand, San Francisco actually has done a remarkable job. This is an issue that has existed since Dianne Feinstein was mayor. That is a true fact. This is an issue that existed when Art Agnos had Camp Agnos in front of City Hall.
I was just about to say.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, we were doing pretty well until the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, we closed MSC South. We closed Division Circle, and you saw that erupt, particularly in the Tenderloin. It crept up into the southern portion of the district that I've had the honor of representing on and off for the last 20 years. And I really want to salute the community and my staff, wherein we were actually able to get the southern part of our district, particularly along Lower Polk and Fern Alley, into the Tenderloin plan. And I went out there personally. I met with those unhoused individuals personally. And since that time, many things have happened. We continued to build the first TAY, Transitional Aged Youth Navigation Center at 888 Post Street during the pandemic. That will be open in a couple of months. We were able to use home key money from the state of California in the amount of $45 million that the board just approved to acquire a 232 unit building at 1000 Sutter. All of this in the southern portion of the district that I have the honor of representing. So those are the ways that we've been addressing that on the ground. I was an early proponent of navigation centers throughout the city. As a matter of fact, I proposed one on Broadway that is now being built out as affordable housing at 88 Broadway. I was a proponent of another site at the corner of Bay and Kearney Street that I am still working with the mayor to bring about as another place for our unhoused people. But go ahead, Joe.
Let me pause you right there. I'm glad you bring up these different locations of the different places because, you know, we're as you're saying them, you know, I'm noticing a bit of a pattern here. We've got one on the southern edge of the district, one on Broadway, one on Bay and Kearney. Is there no opportunity in the heart of North Beach for or the heart of, or in the heart of Chinatown for either a safe sleeping site or a vehicle triage site or any type of homeless shelter?
Yeah, so really great question, Joe. And let me just start by saying that actually my first site that I had my eyes on in when I first got back into office in late 2015 was Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. That is on the border of North Beach and Chinatown at the corner of Broadway and Mason. That fell through despite the homeless czar Bevan Duffy's help. But it's not only about sites, it's also about other mechanisms. I support the conservatorship legislation. I voted for what Supervisor Mandelman, whose mother had her own struggles with mental health issues. I was a very early adopter of what is going to be on this ballot in Proposition A, which is mental health SF. Because we really have to invest. The reality is that the United States of America and the state of California, starting with then Governor Ronald Reagan, started to disinvest from mental health services. We've let a lot of people fall through the cracks. But San Francisco is actually addressing that in many ways. And I really want to appreciate the mayor and my colleague Supervisor Ronan for advancing those things around providing services,
Sure.
And at the same time also doing conservatorship.
Well, you know, on that, you know, the Coalition on Homelessness would say that the mayor is, you know, taking a lot of the money that Prop C got, which they put on the ballot and they kind of, you know, whipped up to back fund a lot of things that were going to be cut and not expanding services, that we're not going to see an expansion of mental health help. We're actually just going to see a maintenance of what we got now. Do you believe that's the case? And do you believe the Prop C funding should be used instead to expand?
So, Joe, let's start with not Prop C, which I supported. I worked with the Coalition on Homelessness. I worked with Mark Benioff to pass that measure on the ballot. That became subject to litigation, which litigation the city has finally prevailed in. But I was one of the 5 people who crafted Proposition F on this November's ballot that gives relief to small businesses, but also unlocks money for homelessness, unlocks money for early childhood education, that actually has those companies that have made a fortune before the pandemic and during the pandemic pay their fair share. I have spent literally hundreds of hours in crafting that piece of public policy with the mayor, with the controller, with my colleagues, and I commend it to everybody who is not listening to Kamala Harris, my kindergarten classmate, debate what's his name, whose name I can't remember.
Pence. But with regards to that, I appreciate the proposition you crafted, but that was not my question. Where should the Prop C funding go? Should it go to expanded mental health help, or should it go to help backfill stuff that might be canceled otherwise?
So Joe, the Prop C was very, very clear and explicit about where those funds would go. It was very explicit about what would go and what percentage would go to the acquisition of new affordable housing, what percentage of that would go to mental and behavioral health. And we will honor and are honoring the voters' will. So it's not about expansion. It is about actually doing what Prop C that the voters voted on, that the Supreme Court just upheld. And that's abundantly clear. I am delighted that money like Prop C is going to allow us to do supportive housing at 1000 Sutter Street, sir.
Sure. So moving to the, one obvious way to help prevent homelessness is to make housing more available to folks. So let's touch on housing. What has your record been on housing? What can we do to help people stay in their apartments, in their homes post-pandemic? in this incredible economic crisis we find ourselves in, is it just eviction moratoriums, or are there other tools that we should be using?
So, Joe, we could spend the rest of the evening talking about that on building new housing starts. I presided over the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, was the co-sponsor of over 10,000 units in the southeast corner of San Francisco. But most importantly, I fundamentally believe in rent control and eviction protection controls. And I have voted and strengthened those in every opportunity that I can that are legal. And in a handful of cases, I've actually supported and even authored legislation that has been subject to litigation by the landlord industry. And in some of those cases, the city has not prevailed. But we have to, remember, the city is not one place. It's an archipelago of neighborhoods. And District 3, which was one of the first settled parts of San Francisco, is the most built out and most dense corner of San Francisco.
So District 3 cannot get more dense? Is that where you're at?
Oh no, it absolutely can get more dense. As a matter of fact, I want to salute the Lower Polk neighbors who have repeatedly supported, as have I, denser development along the Polk Street corridor, along the Geary Street corridor. And that is absolutely appropriate. If it does not displace existing people, if it does not rip apart the fabric of a community. And that is what my 13 of the last 20 years as a public servant has been about. And so it's really easy to run around and say, I want to build 1,000 more units or 10,000 more units. It's much more difficult doing what I've done, which is to spend $5 million of the taxpayers' money to buy the one-story restaurant at 772 Pacific Avenue in Chinatown and find the actual funding to turn that into 80 units. It's very difficult to actually fight with the development industry and move from 12% inclusionary on-site affordable housing to 25% on-site inclusionary housing, because you want to know what? That costs the developers a bunch of profit, and I did that.
And Aaron, we're out of time. Thank you so much for the little fireside chat there. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Danny, we'll go, I'm sorry, pardon me. Yeah, Danny, we'll go to you. Danny, how about a response? You can respond to Aaron's record, or you can respond with your own plan for housing and how we keep people in their homes post-pandemic.
Thank you. And I want to start on the topic of homelessness, the first point in the discussion. I would challenge you to find one San Franciscan that thinks the current situation on our streets is a, quote, remarkable accomplishment. You know, that is not the case. A 41% increase in homelessness in District 3 in the last 5 years is not a remarkable accomplishment. 441 overdose deaths last year and too many more this year is not a remarkable establishment. 0 units of housing completed for homeless individuals in the last 5 years in District 3 is not a remarkable accomplishment. In fact, Supervisor Peskin spoke to the fact that many cities are going through this, and that is absolutely the truth. But other cities are actually making progress on this. You look at Houston, who in the last 7 years has reduced their homelessness in half. They've done that through a housing first approach. You've looked at models in Austin where they're taking a community village approach to rehab and rehabilitation. Those are the sorts of approaches we need to take. And to your point, Joe, on Prop C, Prop C gives us an opportunity to do that. I supported Prop C. I'm excited about Prop C. That money needs to be spent responsibly. We know that last month there was an audit of our Department of Homelessness spending. It found that there were over $100 million in contracts given out without clear performance metrics. So we need to strengthen our reporting so that we have confidence in this increased spending. And I want that increased spending to go towards things like the mental health crisis street teams, so that we're responding to homelessness in the correct way, which is one of social work and mental health professionals and not of police. Yeah,
and it's a pilot program right now. Do you support that as a pilot program, or would you rather see that expanded into a full program, the mental health street team?
I support the pilot program. I think that many folks have called for there to be more teams. I think there's maybe 6 or so teams in the initial pilot. And certainly looking at the budget, if there's a chance to start with more, we all know that we could use more to begin with.
All right, Danny, we are at time. Thank you so much for that response. Lulu, let's go to you. You have 2 minutes. You can either respond to the candidates' discussions of their positions or records, or talk about your own ideas on homelessness and housing.
Okay, well, homelessness is an issue for me because my partner was homeless, my son was homeless. I have not been homeless. I've been spared that, but also I work very closely with a lot of young trans women living in the Tenderloin who I think are on the front line of the homeless issue. First of all, looking at my notes here, we need a long-range plan. We don't need more tinkering with the budget, more stopgap proposals, more improvisation. We need a long-range plan for residents and for housing in the city. We need a vision. The thing is, I never hear about a vision. I have a vision. It's going to probably seem strange to people. It's the vision of a city that I lived a great deal of time in, and that's the city of Amsterdam, where the owners of quality property, there's no limit on them making money buying and selling their properties, but at the same time, there's absolutely world-class public housing. I've seen world-class public housing in a lot of countries. I don't see any reason why we can't have world-class public housing here. However, I also want to bring up something that's a little bit bitter, and I've dealt with Supervisor Peskin on this a couple of times. You know, we hear how the glory of the NAV centers, and then I hear the small business people, the so-called NIMBYs, saying they don't want the homeless around, so they don't want a NAV center around. Then I hear the city officials talking about the NAV centers as if they are Mother Teresa, and I happen to know a lot about Mother Teresa, and they're not Mother Teresa. We never hear from other people in the NAV centers. Let me tell you one thing about people in NAV centers. Let me tell you about homeless trans women who are usually young and vulnerable, and they've left home, and they may not have IDs, and they may not have a way to make money. They get raped in the NAV centers. Their goods are stolen in the NAV centers, confiscated. Their goods are then sold in front of them in the NAV centers. They're forced to purchase drugs in the NAV centers. And if they complain, if they go to the police, they're threatened with death. And when they come to me, and by the way, I have documented cases of this. Documented cases.
We're at time, but I'm going to give you 10 more
When they
seconds
come to me, the city prevents me from helping them. Thank you.
No, go ahead. 10 seconds. What's your solution?
When they come to me and ask for my help, the city blocks me from helping them.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Spencer, let's go to you. Spencer, you can either respond to one of these folks and their positions on housing and homelessness, or you can just talk about your own plan.
Yeah, as far as in response to Aaron Peskin's previous work on homelessness and housing, I think if you asked anyone, and I've talked with a lot of residents, I've talked with a lot of small business owners, I have not had a conversation with a single individual who said that the current status of our streets is better. In fact, every single person that I've talked with, especially individuals who've been in our neighborhood for 20, 30 years, have all said that right now, this is the worst that they have ever seen our streets. This is the worst that they have ever seen our homeless crisis. And as Aaron alluded to earlier, the homeless crisis is not new, but our response to the homeless crisis can be new. We know that this response is not working. We see it over the years. The homeless crisis has only gotten worse. And so we need to make a change there. We need to build a system that is actually an integrated system, as I mentioned before, as far as taking into account every single inroad to homelessness. Why do people become homeless in the first place? Is it because they're getting evicted? Is it because they're losing their job? And how do we support them so that they don't become homeless? What I would like to see is a system where we have no limited or no individuals becoming homeless in the first place. For every single person, for every one person we're currently taking off the street for homelessness, the last I saw was 3 additional individuals becoming homeless. And so that can't be, we can't continue down that way, because then, you know, a majority of San Franciscans are going to be homeless. And so we need to come up with solutions, not just building housing, which is critical, but all of the other steps to that, making sure that people are gainfully employed, making sure people have safety nets, making sure that they have legal aid and legal resources. And there have been some changes on legal aid and legal resources. Those are not enough. Those are, for one, they're underfunded. And for two, an approach of San Francisco a lot of the times is just to pump more money into things. It's going to look a lot different in the years to come, because we're not going to have that money. We're not going to have that tax basis anymore. And so we're going to need to do things more effectively with a smaller budget.
All right, Spencer, we are at time. Thank you so much for that. Lulu, let's go back to you. We're going to have our 10-minute fireside chat. So you get to we get to have a little 10-minute talk on a topic. I thought we might talk about police. You're talking about young trans women and having a lot of problems with folks like that. Let's talk about policing in District 3. Let's end on Polk. Let's talk about reforming police. Police reform, where do you stand on it? What needs to happen?
Well, I was a crime reporter, not a police reporter, a crime reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle for 10 years. I reported 300 family murders. That's about as rough as it gets. I would say my experience and my relationship with the police in my district and in the city is a very professional one. I stand for better policing, and I certainly stand for reform of policing. What I stand for above all is something I've already done, actually. I've created an informal rank and file committee of men and women police officers, mainly in Central Station, but also in the Tenderloin Station and elsewhere, who are committed to new ideas, new solutions, a new vision of policing in our city. It doesn't have to be one that uses a lot of radical rhetoric. It has to be one that emphasizes the fact that I believe that policing in North Beach is very good. I mean, I think the police community relations in North Beach and Chinatown are good. Of course, it's different in the Tenderloin. But I would say that if we can work with the rank and file police officers, one of the things that I've heard from the officers when I say I formed a rank and file informal committee for men and women police officers to study and develop solutions to these problems, the thing they say is nobody ever listens to them. It's kind of like those trans women I was mentioning in the NAV centers. Nobody listens to the trans women in the NAV centers. Nobody listens to the police officers about their problems. This is what I'm about. I'm about giving voice to the voiceless and listening to those who have not been heard before. So I'm going on the assumption that we can reform policing by hearing the police officers themselves.
So where do you stand on the issue of defunding the police? Do you believe the police should be defunded at all? Do you agree with?
Well, that's a big word, defund the police. Nobody really seems to know what that means. I certainly am in favor of a more, what I would call, humanistic approach. I don't think that a police officer should have to be work as a substitute counselor if somebody's having a psychiatric crisis. I see a lot of these things go on, and I think that it would be a lot better if we had people out in the field who can respond to psychiatric crises and similar crises without doing it with a gun in their hands. Mm-hmm. I think they can do it with other tools, and I think they can work with the police. Another thing is this: I am for a very new, imaginative vision of community policing, by which I mean there should be auxiliaries that are citizens, that are residents of the neighborhoods, that have minimal training, that can't make arrests, that are not carrying weapons of any kind, but who can work with the police and work with psychiatric and other counselors to abate these problems in a serious way.
We have the ambassador programs in some neighborhoods. Is that kind of what you're thinking of? Is like the Union Squares kind of ambassadors, that kind of thing? Is that more what you're thinking of?
No, I'm thinking of an entirely new approach. I'm thinking of an approach that emphasizes what the rank and file officers know, what the psychiatric and crisis workers know, and what the people living in the community know.
Sure.
Bring those two groups of people together.
Response teams that are coming out that the mayor has announced. It's like a pilot program. There's only going to be a few teams, but that are kind of like street crisis mental health response teams that respond to mental health calls instead of police. Do you think that we should go all in? Do you think that should be a bigger expansion instead of just doing a short amount of it? Because it is kind of what you're talking about, is a mental health response.
It is kind of, but I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't trust the mayor's instincts on any of these things. I mean, we had this terrible situation in the Tenderloin, which I think was created by improvisation. Improvisation is great in jazz music. It's lousy in public policy. I think we need to start anew with a plan, with a vision, and without letting ourselves be burdened by the legacies of prior politicians who, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying this about Mr. Peskin. Mr. Peskin and I are good friends, but politicians in this city have radically failed this city. And rather than take what they've done before and tinker with it and move it along and push it along, I think what I say, a new vision, a long-range plan, and those three things that I mentioned, input from the rank and file officers, input from those crisis workers, and input from the residents themselves. one last thing I'd like to add, and I didn't get a chance to allude to it.
Well, we have a
One
full
of
10
my
minutes. We got 5 minutes
favorite
left.
idea. What?
Well, we've got a full 10 minutes. You got 5 minutes after this. So you got plenty.
Okay, well, so I just wanted to add, I have this vision of dealing with homelessness by organizing homeless cooperatives. Listen, I know a lot of homeless people. When you're trans, if you don't know homeless people, there's something wrong with you. A lot of homeless people, a lot of them. And as I said, I've had homelessness in my own family.
It's
Homeless
a sad
people
thing. The
are
rates
not.
of LGBTQ
What?
people in homelessness are insane, and a
Yeah,
lot of
well, homeless people are not created in a factory somewhere. Homeless people are people who, most of them, I would say probably 80 to 90% of them had jobs, they had families, they had working lives. Let's find out, as I think Mr. Simonsen said, and I agree with this, let's find out why they're homeless. Let's ask, how did this happen to you? Maybe the first thing we need to do is have a very well organized and calibrated study so we know why these people are the way they are.
Do you feel that the point in time count, the annual point in time count, is insufficient? Because there is an annual count where the city gets hundreds of volunteers and they go out and canvass the city and ask everyone, when were you last housed? Why'd you become homeless? Do you feel that this isn't enough? I mean, it's a pretty huge.
No, I'm in favor of a complete reform of the social welfare system so that the caseworkers and others who work with homeless people, who, believe me, I've heard a lot of complaints about them, because their attitude toward homeless people is that a homeless person is just a mark on a computer screen, and that justifies their salary, and that's all it is. I'd like to see complete retraining, a whole new approach on the part of these social welfare workers, bureaucrats, professionals, so that they understand that they have a very serious mission in our society. That's the serious mission, is to redeem people, to do what Barcelona does, to do what Amsterdam does, to make those who have suffered homelessness feel once again that they are worthy people in our society. So my approach with cooperatives is to find out, what can you do? What is your economic skill? And I am for grants, small grants, Grameen Bank grants, is something from Bangladesh.
Well, let's get into a few, as long as we were starting on crime and policing, let's get into a few kind of neighborhood-specific questions. We did have some from the Russian Hill neighbors and others. Some of these neighborhood groups are claiming that an SRO on 2048 Polk Street has caused an increase in crime locally, and that the supervisor has ignored this. What's your take? The presence of SROs in a neighborhood engender more crime? Is this a problem? And if it is, how would you tackle it?
Oh, I have something interesting to tell you. I'm doing this interview from an SRO where I've lived since 1977. That's because I don't like to spend a lot of money on rent. My partner and I have a small place in Southern Cal because she works in the movie industry. But I prefer to spend my money on travel, on books, and frankly, as a trans woman now, on clothes and makeup and stuff like that. I've lived in an SRO since 1977. It's a very fine SRO up here in North Beach. And I specialize informally in helping homeless people get into the better SROs, which are in Chinatown and in North Beach. I have no idea. I don't know the name of that SRO you've mentioned. I'd be glad to go over and look at it myself. Obviously, there are some terrible SROs. There's some terrible SROs right here in North Beach. There are terrible SROs all over the city. I can name a couple of them for you. The question is not attacking the solution is not to attack the SROs.
I think it's the
point is to understand something that we no longer see in New York and we no longer see in certain other cities. SROs are a fabulous resource for taxi drivers, writers, strippers, new arrivals in town, restaurant workers, all sorts of people who don't have the money or even the inclination, like me, to spend a lot of money on an apartment rent. SROs are a powerful and positive and valuable resource for us. So let's have a plan to put the SROs on a better footing, to make, by the way, one interjection, my son lives in the Henry Hotel at 6th and Mission, which was advertised as a city-funded solution to homelessness. He's had to move out of it. Let's put the SROs in a place where they can do credit to our city, to be like the SROs were in New York before the arrival of the Moses devastation. Let's take those SROs and make them a positive resource for our city.
Right, that's fair. And I think we're just about running up on time. So you have about
Okay.
30 more seconds. Anything you'd like to add on efforts to reform policing or to address crime in the neighborhoods?
Well, crime is obviously a complex issue.
I
We
know,
have
tough
a
for
pretty
30
low
seconds.
crime level here in Chinatown and North Beach, but it's pretty high over in the Tenderloin, having experienced it myself. I think my solution is the solution I said. Police officers working together with psychiatric and other social workers and working together with members of the community who are committed and paid to go out and work alongside of the officers and the social workers.
Beautiful. I think we're at time, Lulu. Thank you so much for the chat. Danny, let's go to you. You've got 2 minutes. You can tackle, I would appreciate if you would say whether you support defunding police and to what degree. How would you address crime in the neighborhoods, including Polk, and what your view of the current crime situation in the neighborhood is, and solutions.
Thank you. So I do not support defunding the police, but I support reforming the police. I think this year in particular has made it clear to all of us how dramatic we need to be in terms of our budget reform. I think that's where it starts. You know, when I've been studying our police budgets, how they've grown in past years and how other departments haven't been kept up, the numbers are just incredible. You know, in the last 5 years, SFPD's budget has grown $200 million. And then you compare that to another department that we've spoke about tonight, the mental health services and all the societal ills that it is meant to cure. How can it do that if its budget has only increased $30 million in that same time? How can we find it acceptable that our SFPD police force unit is funded at $2 million and yet our new Office of Racial Equity is funded at less than $1 million? So we need to think about our priorities, think about our budget. And I think we've got to look at the DOJ reforms that were passed in 2016, calling out the behavior of our police department, and realize that only a quarter of those have actually been met right now. We should be holding those reforms and tying those to any sort of budget expansion or budget changes for our police department. Now, specifically about some of the crime in the neighborhood, the reality is that crime is changing this year. I mean, if you look at the numbers from whether it's Central Station or Northern Station, crime is changing. Burglaries are up, arson is up, and we need to make sure that our police department is able to have a plan to respond to those particular incidents. How are they adapting in such a difficult and different year without the tourism, without the shopping in Union Square? You know, we've seen things move towards homes and apartments, garages. There's been a string of burglaries in Russian Hill and in North Beach. And I attended that community meeting, virtual community meeting, where most of the time was the DA telling us that things were fine, the DA telling us what neighbors should be doing, instead of them telling us what the DA is doing, them telling us what the police department's doing.
All right, Dan, we're on time. Thank you so much for that. Supervisor Peskin, let's go to you. 2 minutes to talk about all of policing. Think you can do it?
I have unmuted. Thank you, Joe.
Wow. All right. So, 2 minutes. Do you support defunding the police? If so, to what degree? What do you think about that SRO? I think it's the Broadway Hotel that some of these neighbors are saying has caused more crime. Has it caused more crime, and what do you do about it? What do you do about crime in the neighborhood? Go.
Joe, can I have 10 minutes for that? Let me just start by saying that this is the third debate that I'm having with some of these folks, and we've had some other forums, the Chronicle, the Examiner, where we have talked. And I'm actually a little bit taken aback, if not shocked, by the words of the last speaker, who in our earliest interactions was fully about defunding the police, as I was saying what I believe, which is that we are in a moment of great societal change. And there are roles that the police play in San Francisco and in the United States of America and around the world that absolutely need to change. And this is the time to do it. And this is the time to do it with a great amount of thought. We should be sending mental health professionals to folks who are in crisis. If they're violent, they may need to be accompanied by a law enforcement officer. But the notion that happened at our last debate earlier today, wherein the last speaker actually alleged that I want to reduce the safety is absolutely untrue. The reality is that I have been in the trenches with the mayor's office, with the Police Officers Association, with my colleagues about how we are going to do appropriate police reform. And let me direct you to this ballot. Proposition D, which is fundamental reform to law enforcement in San Francisco, I'm a co-sponsor of. Proposition E, which is fundamental change to law enforcement in San Francisco, I am a co-sponsor of. My vision is on this ballot.
You got 8 more seconds. Burglaries. How do you stop them? We got more of them.
We have had a string of burglaries. Actually, District 3 is actually much lower than the rest of the city. There have been a number of very good arrests. I want to thank Deputy Chief Lazar and the investigations team from the SFPD for tracking those folks down and busting them. And I've been working with the District Attorney's Office every day to make sure that they are appropriately charged and justice is served.
All right, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron. Well, we can hit that a little later. Spencer, let's get you on policing. You can choose to respond to any one of your fellow candidates, or you can illuminate us on your own positions. Defunding police, crime in the neighborhood. How does it stand? 2 minutes.
Yeah, as far as moving funds from SFPD to better better areas and to better use them, I absolutely agree with that. Whether that comes under the notion of defunding the police, I don't know. Again, this idea of defunding the police is different from different groups. So I absolutely would support moving that money, especially because SFPD's budget is so huge, to other resources, whether that be mental health resources, whether that be homelessness resources, or other outreach that we can do. So yes, I support that. Yes, I think as far as completely getting rid of the police or having some notion that we're not going to have any SFPD any longer, I think that just does not work, and that's not reasonable. I know there's very few people who kind of want that solution, but if you talk with some of our communities, our Chinatown communities, our communities of color, other minorities, what they're saying is not that. What they're saying is actually they want police to help them in situations that are dangerous, where there are violent situations, where there are break-ins, where there are businesses being destroyed. And so we need to be able to balance those things. We need to be able to balance, say, defunding or removing some of the funding from the department, but also making sure that people are still protected. We live in a city and we need the protection of individuals to keep people safe and businesses safe. And so I think what we need to do is strike the right balance, and that can be difficult.
All right, you've got about 20 more seconds. How about you invoked the kind of the Chinatown neighborhood and those communities. There is a bit of a rift between them and the Black community. Is that something that you intend to work on?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this in one of the past debates, but we need to do a lot of community building. We need to do a lot of community building between the Chinese community, between the Black community, and other minorities, because it's critical that we come together and we work on a lot of these efforts. We've seen too many hate crimes against different groups, and we need to solve that by actually coming together as a community, working together, and coming up with some real solutions.
All right, Spencer, thank you so much for that. Now, we did hear more direct candidate kind of speech towards each other, critiques towards each other. So we're gonna let Danny respond. Danny, you got 2 minutes to respond to Mr. Peskin, and Mr. Peskin, you'll get a chance to retort to that too. All right, go for it.
Thank you, Joe. And so I think the comment was made that I support defunding the police. That's not true. I've been very clear in my stance all along, which has been about budget justice. And yes, that can mean partial disinvestment. It can mean partial moving of those funds to other organizations. I supported the 20% change the mayor put forward recently. And Supervisor Peskin spoke to my claim that he wants to defund the police that I said earlier today in another debate. And I said that because it's true. Take a look at the League of Pissed Off Voters, where they ask, what percentage of the SFPD budget should we move to other funds? He responded 100%. Take a look at the article on the Frisk this week, where they ask, what do you support? And he said, I support defund SFPD now. When you pull up their website, their ultimate goal, they say on the bottom, is the complete abolition of the San Francisco Police Department. I don't think we need to do that. I think we should not do that. I support reimagining our police department.
All right. Aaron? You got it. Danny took about a minute. Why don't you take about a minute? Unmute yourself, sir.
Well, first you got to start my video. Okay. It's really interesting. I mean, we all march. I was raised in the 60s. My mother and father went to the March on Washington. We all march and we all listen, but I don't speak out of both sides of my mouth. And the reality is we can all work together to come up with better law enforcement solutions in San Francisco. I've been very clear about that. Apparently, my competitor is spending a lot of time looking at stuff on the internet. I will do the same and look at all of his questionnaires. But the reality is I'm respected by the rank and file of law enforcement. I am the supervisor that actually was one of the only supervisors to vote against the expansion of the command staff in San Francisco. And let us be abundantly clear, which is in 2015. The Police Officers Association spent over $100,000 on an independent expenditure against my campaign for election. My history in this is clear. But ultimately, our job at this moment in society is to move all of this forward, to fundamentally change the way policing happens in San Francisco and America. And I am deeply involved in that. And I'm working with the mayor on that. And I'm working with my colleagues on that. And that is why I'm endorsed by all 10 of my colleagues and the mayor and our assembly delegation. Because I have been a uniter and I've been a bridge builder. And that's exactly what you get if you vote for me this cycle.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much for that. Okie dokie. Last but certainly not least, we're going to have our little fireside chat here with Mr. Simonsen. I thought I'd give us a neighborhood kind of grab bag. You know, we've talked about really kind of larger citywide issues, but also tried to narrow them down to neighborhoods. But we have a lot of questions from these groups from Nob Hill and from Russian Hill and from the Lower Polk that regard neighborhood issues. Really down in the concrete neighborhood issues. People are asking, how do we get more trash receptacles? What's being done to make District 3 more clean? How do we get rid of the increased amount of garbage in the neighborhood? A lot of concerns about cleanliness, drug use, and more unfortunate lack of bathroom access that's maybe leading to excrement throughout different neighborhoods. Let's tackle that. How do we keep, Spencer, how do we keep District 3 clean? What are the issues? How do you provide more neighborhood services, and particularly as it pertains to the things I just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to note one important thing. I received a flyer the other day from Aaron Peskin's campaign saying the signs are all around us about re-electing Aaron Peskin. One of the things that it said on that campaign, on that flyer, was that our streets are cleaner. I have not, again, talked with a single person in my neighborhood, in our community, who thinks our streets are cleaner. Not a single one. Not a single business owner who thinks our streets are cleaner. And so bringing up, doing things to clean it up it's critical. And we're just, right now we're at a state where, like you said, we have needles, we still have needles everywhere, we still have garbage, we still have feces and excrement. And what we really need to be doing is we need to be doing those things like bringing in more garbage cans. There's not a single garbage can on my entire block. And that is just completely crazy to think that we don't have any of these garbage cans. The other thing is we had a kind of new big belly garbage cans that were, I guess, going in somewhere around the city. And then a lot of those got pulled. So I am very concerned about that personally on my block, seeing issues where we can't even get garbage cans on the street block. And I know some of those issues relate to how people use garbage cans and sometimes putting, their own garbage in there. And so we need to look again at the cause of the issue. Why are they doing this? Why are they, overrunning these garbage cans? And I think it also does play back into a lot of the stuff that we've talked about for this whole kind of discussion about homelessness, about being supportive of individuals who are homeless and who are in the streets, and making sure that we have the resources to get them off the streets. You know, we can't expect an individual who's homeless to, you know, hold going to the bathroom and not be able to go anywhere. They're going to go somewhere if they're homeless. And so we need those resources. You know, all those resources work together to get us the city that we want. We can't pick and choose one or two of them. We need all of them. Otherwise, we see what we currently have as far as the state of our streets.
Well, you say we need more trash cans. You say we need more access to bathrooms. But how do you do it? Give me specifics. What are your plans?
Yeah, so I mean, trash cans, that's a little bit simpler. I've seen a lot of, we used to have a lot of trash cans on my street, and we used to have a lot of trash cans in other areas of the district. But they've been continually removed. And so we need to look into why that's the case. I think the case was that people were filling them up with their own garbage. Well, why are they filling them up with their own garbage? Is it because they're producing too much garbage to go and be collected by the garbage collectors in DPW? If so, we kind of need to figure out why that's happening in order to actually address it. So just, again, pumping more money into the situation is not necessarily the right thing to do. We need to focus on the outcomes here. As far as street cleaning, I agree. I am on yes on doing the new split out of the Department of DPW.
I was just going to ask you. You read my mind. This is Proposition B, folks, just in case you're not following. This is Supervisor Haney's proposal to split DPW into a Department of Sanitation and Streets and Public Works, and to give oversight to those agencies so that there's more control into the contracts that they give out and more accountability.
Right. So please, so I'm absolutely in support of that. My one concern about that is the expense, because it is going to be an expensive endeavor to get to form that new department and hire and keep people there. And so that's always my concern with San Francisco, especially now, is adding expenses to our bills. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a really hard issue if our tax basis is going to be going down significantly, which due to COVID, it looks like that's going to happen. As far as forming that committee so that there's less corruption, I think that's absolutely critical. We've seen tons of corruption in DPW. And I might note that Aaron Peskin was a huge supporter of Mohammed Nuru, the individual who was arrested by the FBI back when he was first under investigation for ethics violations here in San Francisco. So absolutely, we need more oversight. We need more resources there as well, but we need to work within the limits that we have, and the limits are going to be severe monetary limits coming up.
We have a few more specific questions around cleanliness. Obviously, these groups are real focused on making sure that the streets are getting cleaner. What can we do to make sure property owners of vacant buildings are more responsible for cleaner sidewalks and for their storefronts?
Yeah, I think this has been, I mean, this is going to continue to be an issue, and this is going to get to be a larger issue as well, especially for areas where we have vacant buildings with the storefronts that are now no longer being maintained. I think some of that responsibility does fall on the owners to make sure that any owner should make sure that their property is maintained, whether it's vacant or whether it has a tenant or someone there. And we also have to, take into account that a lot of, because it's San Francisco and because we have such a big problem with our streets, it can be quite cost prohibitive and expensive to businesses, to residents, and to others to actually maintain these streets. And so the city needs to be working with them and providing resources to them, as well as, everyone needs to take care of their property and take care of their neighborhood.
Well, let's say they don't want to. Let's say they're an owner in the East Coast or New York corporate owners of a property. They're just looking to make rent money. They don't care how clean it is outside in D3. They're just waiting for their next tenant. How do you hold them accountable to make sure that it's clean outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to some of the issues that we've had with vacancies in North Beach and how that's been handled as well, just vacant storefronts. And one of the options is to go in like Aaron Peskin did and to put all these fines and fees and all this stuff on top of it as far as the vacancy storefront tax. But I think the real option there is actually to go in and to work with the business owner, say, hey, at this point, you're not getting any money for rent because nobody's renting this out. How about you work with the city of San Francisco? How about we put in a business here, or put in a resource here, so that we can make use of these storefronts. Nobody wants to see these vacant storefronts and these vacant places in their neighborhood. They're an eyesore, and they're a concern as far as the health of the community. And so I think the city needs to step in and say, hey, we're gonna work with you, and we're going to do these things to better our community. In some cases, the business owner might not want to work with us, but I think that's gonna be the minority of cases.
All right, and I was seeing some more specific questions around Prop B. Folks were asking, what can you, if Prop B passes, will that ensure that everyone will get regular street cleaning? Right now, some people have it, some don't. I mean, are there mechanisms that you think in there will help people get more targeted cleaning, more targeted help? Is that part of your support for it?
I mean, I would support more targeted cleaning, and I would kind of go to the 311 system. Back several years ago, I used to use the 311 system, and I'm sure many people feel this way as well. I used to use the 311 app. And then more and more as the years went on, 311 never responded to anything. They never cleaned anything. I would report things several times a day. Nothing would ever happen. Nothing would ever be cleaned. Sometimes I'd want to find resources for welfare checks. I don't know if anyone's tried that recently. 311 used to have a system to have welfare checks on homeless individuals where they would send out the HOT team, the homeless outreach team, to talk with those individuals. We no longer have the ability to actually say, hey, we need help here because someone is having a mental health crisis.
Right.
And that's really concerning because if you call 311, there's no resources there either. And so the lack of resources there, I can definitely feel it. I can feel it from community members as far as saying, hey, this is dirty, nothing's happening about it. We do need to expand them, and we do need to have them better targeted.
And with a minute and a half left, there's a few more neighborhood specific questions. People are asking about shared streets. We have a number of shared streets open in the district now. There's some places where, parklets are opening up. Should those stay? What is your stance on the shared streets? Should they become permanent? And the parklets as well?
Yeah, so I definitely am in favor of the shared streets program and the parklets, and making sure that they're vibrant, nice community places for our residents to gather. And I would like to see them stay around. And I think it gives San Francisco a better area for gathering, for community gathering. And I think sometimes that's what we lack in certain areas of our district. If you look at where I live on Bush Street, before we had a little parklet, there's just a huge, Bush Street is a pretty large thoroughfare. And so there would just be constant traffic. Now with these additional parklets and slowed streets, it definitely gives it more of a neighborhood feel. And as far as just shared streets in general, most of those shared streets that we've seen have been in North Beach. And there's been very few in other areas. I know we're working on some in Polk Street, but that's been, I've heard constant requests from business owners on Polk Street for that, and it's taken months to get it. All the ones we have are in North Beach.
So there's not enough equity in the process, you'd say?
Absolutely. I think
All right.
North Beach is advocated for way too much above and beyond all other neighborhoods here.
All right, and that's our time. Thank you so much. Danny, let's go to you. Cleanliness in the district, cleanliness in specific corridors. People are also asking about cleanliness around that Broadway Hotel SRO. They seem to certainly have a big problem with it. Shared streets and parklets, wherever you want to start, go for it. You got 2 minutes. If you are unmuted, did we unmute Danny?
I'm here. I'm just trying to get my video going.
I'll reset.
Give me the keys. All right, here we go. Thanks for the question. This is something that I'm really passionate about. It's the kind of nuts and bolts work that I've been doing as the president of my neighborhood association for the past 4 years, a group called North Beach Neighbors. And this is one of the major concerns that we've been trying to tackle. And so just as a volunteer, as a community organizer, I've tried to take action on this. We brought the Adopt a Street program to North Beach, where we're actually going out 20 or 30 of us neighbors getting vested up and actually cleaning up the streets ourselves and just drawing attention to how bad this problem is and how the city needs to take some action. We sponsored a dozen different ash cans, these little units that sit on the poles where you can put your toxic cigarette butt in there so it's not washed into the ocean. And that's the kind of stuff I've started and really am passionate about. I think as we look forward, I would be very, very strongly in favor of programs like Downtown Streets Team, making sure that that expands District 3. That's a model that gives individuals who are homeless or formerly homeless, gives them employment and also housing. And of course, it helps to clean up and beautify our neighborhoods. I think that the Lower Nob Hill, the Lower Polk area is a perfect place to start that program in District 3. And you spoke a little bit about restrooms earlier. District 3 has not a single 24-hour public restroom, so that would be a priority of ours as well. When we think about the state of our streets, it is that way in large part because we don't have access to those public amenities and public restrooms.
Is the one by Washington Square Park not 24-hour?
It's not 24-hour, no. And the topic of street cleaning was brought up. This is something I've seen so many neighbors organize and work years on. Right now, to get street cleaning, you have to have a petition. You have to have at least half your block filled out. If you look at a map of all the street cleaning in San Francisco, there's a very curious northeastern corner of San Francisco, which is largely omitted. I want to lower the bar to getting street cleaning. If neighbors want it, it shouldn't have to be a years-long struggle to get it.
All right, Danny, that's us. That's the time. Thank you so much. Aaron, 2 minutes. Where the hell are the trash cans?
Start my video. Okay, we're started. So first of all, let me just say COVID has been really tough on street cleanliness, in large part because for many months, the city stopped enforcing parking and mechanized street sweeping came to a halt. That has actually changed in the last couple of weeks, and you're seeing the results before your very eyes. But in addition to that, I thank you to the Discover Polk CBD, thank you to the Lower Polk CBD, thank you to the Fisherman's Wharf CBD, to the Union Square Business Improvement District, as well as ones that we've gotten in North Beach that are not even in CBDs, and the author of Big Belly Trash Cans. There are more Big Belly Trash Cans in the northeast corner of San Francisco than any other part of San Francisco. And let me just say this, the Mohammed Nuru corruption scandal is disgusting, is horrible. I believe in first chances, but not in second chances, and certainly not in third chances. As the author of the Government Audit and Oversight Committee that has rooted out corruption in San Francisco, I've been very clear that Mr. Nuru's behavior is criminal. But let me go further than that, which is I have been at the forefront of getting pit stops. Yes, Mr. Sauter, not 24 hours a day in District 3. And I want to thank my former colleague, Jane Kim, and her then staff, now my staff, Sunny Angulo, for pioneering that. But we've gone much further than that. We just got a new contract for new toilets in San Francisco, and we are on the eve of a new trash can contract in San Francisco that Mr. Nuru held up. So, and I'm the person who put in all of the cigarette butt receptacles with the Surfrider Foundation that you see all over that have greatly reduced the number of cigarette butts on our street. But COVID has absolutely been tough. With that, I will cede the floor.
Thank you so much. All right, Lulu, we end this round with you. Cleanliness in the district, trash cans, cleaning the streets. How do we do it? Where do you stand?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say something. I've known Aaron in the beginning of his career in public office, and I have many disagreements with him, but I did not come in here to diss Aaron Peskin. I'm here to say it's time to use this opportunity to make a fresh start on all fronts. Obviously, the situation of clean streets is disastrous in our city. It's disastrous in North Beach. It was commented that the shared streets, North Beach has gotten more shared streets than other parts of the city. Well, that's because this is the entertainment and tourism part of our city aside from Fisherman's Wharf. I have questions about the shared streets. I'm afraid that it's going to cause a parking problem in North Beach. There are lots of other questions. I've seen it abused by at least 2 business owners. I'd also like to say that I've seen the Deco kiosk at Washington Square Park radically, shouldn't use that word, but unfortunately abused. And I spoke to the Deco people today about that. What do we need to do? We need to remember that there's no such thing as a civilized city anywhere in the world that has filthy streets. Not Barcelona, not Albuquerque, not any city that has pride in itself allows its streets to become filthy. Once again, we need a vision. We need a long-range plan. We don't just need to come along and say, okay, we were spending this amount of money and let's move it over here. Let's tinker with this. Let's yell at Aaron Peskin. No, we need a vision and a long-range plan to make this a Class A city, a world-class city, which is what it was when I was growing up. And that begins with safe, clean, smooth streets. Safe streets means changes in policing. Smooth streets means fill in the potholes. And above all, clean streets. And that can be done in a lot of different ways. I know a lot of business owners that ask, why don't we have a coordinated program to get the spaces in front of the businesses clean? This is done in every city in the world. So this is not a gigantic conundrum. This is something that can be done very simply. We have to have a vision and a long-range plan.
Thank you so much. Okay, I want to thank all the candidates for those long, lengthy, great responses. We're now moving to our lightning round, which is a little different than some lightning rounds that just have simple yes or no answers. We're going to have 1-minute answers. You're going to have brief answers for these questions. We do have a few ones that we're going to have for short hits. We're going to do about a minute response each. We're going to start with a different person for each question. I believe we have just 3 of these. Aaron, we're going to start with you. We'll go Aaron, Lulu, Spencer, and then Danny. Aaron, for 1 minute, stance on Prop 22. How do you feel about it?
Absolutely no. The gig economy has exploited hundreds of thousands of people. Uber, Lyft, Postmates are spending over $180 million to basically deny healthcare to hundreds of thousands of low-wage earners in the state. It is time for them to be W-2 and not 1099 folks. They should use that $180 million to actually pay their employees. It is disgusting. Prop 22 upholds Assembly Bill 5, which upheld the Dynamex case. Our history bends towards justice, and no on Prop 22.
All right, that's about a minute. And I should say, pardon me, not doing my hostly duties, Prop 22 would exempt Uber, Lyft, and Instacart from state labor law that would allow them to classify their drivers and such people as contractors. Otherwise, they will become full employers, giving benefits and other such full employment opportunities to their drivers. Lulu, how do you feel about Prop 22?
First of all, I'm going to be very blunt. I was a cab driver once. I was probably the worst cab driver in history because I'm kind of girly and not a very good driver. My partner, she does all the driving in the family. I am totally and completely opposed to the continuing spread of scab drivers employed by Lyft, employed by Uber, and other gig workers taking the bread out of the mouths of honest cab drivers and other honest workers. I would like to see Lyft and Uber banned from this city. I would like to see some support for unionization of cab drivers and for cab drivers to once again be an important pillar of our city. I have never taken a Lyft. Once I took an Uber because another person paid for it. I didn't like doing it. My partner who works in the movie industry, she doesn't take Uber or Lyft. We know how it is for cab drivers. Hardworking cab drivers are out there on the street. They're pounding, they're pounding away to make a living. Let's support them and let's get the gig economy cut down in size so it's no longer an octopus.
All right, Lulu, thank you very much. Spencer, Prop 22, support or not, and why?
I am not in support of Prop 22. I'm also not in support of AB5 because I think AB5 implemented this process incorrectly. I think one of the issues, and you can see it if you're, you can see it by all the exemptions in AB5. First thing is there's a whole host of exemptions. And then you can also see it by what impact AB5 has in the end. And in several cases, including a case of my own, AB5 makes it nearly impossible to actually have a retirement account. So if I was a contract employee, then I'd actually be able to open what's called a simple 401k. But because of AB5, I have to be classified under full-time employee, and in that case, my employer actually doesn't provide a retirement account. So I'm basically excluded from both systems. I think both AB5 as well as Prop 22, I would be no on.
All right, Danny, let's go to you.
I'm a no on Prop 22. I mean, this is just another example of how some of the incredible wealth from the technology sector is not flowing to those who are actually on the ground doing the work. It's a clear no for me.
Don't you work in the technology sector?
No, I'm a nonprofit director.
Yeah,
I work in tech.
But you had some sort of tech-related job? No?
I used to run a marketing agency.
Okay, thank you. All right, on to our next lightning round question. Do you support the extension of Central Subway to North Beach, Fisherman's Wharf, the Marina, the Presidio, beyond? Lulu, let's start with you. Oh, Lulu, you're muted. Sorry. There you go.
I do not support the Chinese Muni subway boondoggle. I do not support it. And when elected, I will call for the recovery of those funds, the shutdown of that boondoggle, an investigation into all of the doubtlessly corrupt contracting that went into it. It is not necessary. It is not useful. Our Muni drivers and our Muni lines between Market Street and Fisherman's Wharf are perfectly usable. I use them every day, the 30 Stockton, the 8. That thing was one of the examples of the corruption in the state. And I noticed, by the way, all of those signs around Chinatown that say Chinatown Station, not Rose Pack Station. That reflects the fact that that was a boondoggle worked by Rose Pack, who was a political boss of the old kind. No, I want that money back. I want the thing shut down. I want it to stop interfering with the people on the street. We don't need it. We never needed it. All we need is better Muni service, better pay for the drivers, and by the way, better union rights for the Muni drivers.
All right, Lulu, we're out of time. Thank you so much. I would also add that any description of a project as a Chinese boondoggle, I would say certainly not something I would endorse as part of our discussion. Please, let's try to keep it civil. Spencer, please, you have a minute.
Yes, I do support the extension of the Central Subway up through Chinatown and North Beach. I think any project where we are adding more public transit to our system is good. I think it's helpful, especially when we get tourists back, to get them up into those areas. And I think we did fail as far as supporting our small businesses when we started with those projects. I think that's one area that I am unhappy about, is that our small businesses were kind of thrown under the bus. And then when we saw that they were having difficulties and we heard from small businesses, then that was the point in which the city jumped in and decided to provide assistance and funding for them. We should have had that from the get-go. That should have been factored into the process and should have been factored in to kind of the approval there, that those small businesses would be protected and would be helped throughout building of that Central Subway.
All right, thank you so much. Danny, let's go to you.
Yes, I absolutely support extending the Central Subway to North Beach and to Fisherman's Wharf, and then making sure it's on track to orient towards the Marina. I think we've got to do this, of course, with learning the lessons of some of our past mistakes. We're years behind completion of the Central Subway right now, so we've got to learn from those mistakes, make sure they don't happen again. But the northeastern corner of San Francisco experiences a lot of gridlock. It experiences a lot of congestion. When you actually look at the fact that we don't have protected bike lanes, we don't have rapid bus routes throughout the core of D3, I think you see the answer on why. And so Central Subway is going to be a big part of solving that.
And do you support it all the way out Presidio?
Yes, absolutely. I think the financially the next leg of it makes sense to be North Beach and Fisherman's Wharf. That's what the studies have told us. The North Beach station or the North Beach just needs to have a station. The tunnel is already in the ground all the way to Washington Square at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. Aaron, 1 minute.
Thank you, Joe. Let me just start by saying I think all of the candidates are in agreement on that, and I am the supervisor who actually got the $1.7 million to do the community outreach for the next phase that when, God willing, Kamala Harris, who is toasting Mr. Pence this evening, becomes the vice president, and we actually end up with the kind of federal money that we need to do a capital project of that size. But I think we're all in agreement on that. And I do want to thank you for your comments and admonitions with regard to the unfortunate statement that was made a little bit earlier. But we actually have something that is on this ballot, which is Proposition RR, to give a stable, independent source of funding to Caltrain that Supervisor Walton and I helped negotiate the terms for, that is on the ballot in all 3 counties, that is going to help decongest the peninsula. And finally, I just want to close by saying that even during the pandemic, the northeast corner of San Francisco, commonly known as District 3, is incredibly well served by Muni, by the 8, by the 30, by the 45, by the 12. We're doing much better than almost any other district in the city.
Great. All right. Last and final lightning round question. I'm going to use my prerogative and do one more transit one just because this is a real nice one that the Lower Polk neighbors brought. Congestion pricing. Congestion pricing is being studied for downtown. Certainly there was one calculation of it beforehand, and now there's a new one post-COVID with many changes coming to downtown. Should we still support it? Do you support it? Do you not support it? Why? Tell me. We will start this last question with Spencer.
I'm not in support of congestion pricing. I think we need to do more of a study on it. I think it has potential to really negatively impact businesses in those areas, especially in downtown now. And as we mentioned and talked about before, downtown is having a huge crisis as far as the small businesses because there's nobody who's working in those towers anymore. A lot of them are vacant. And so I think we need to, again, look into how we reuse some of those spaces and create new housing and create new community spaces so that we can bring in and support our small businesses. But as far as the specifics of doing a congestion pricing and doing downtown, I think it's going to be cost prohibitive to implement in the first place. I think there's a lot of traffic that just goes through downtown to other areas, maybe up to the Embarcadero. And so I think that the idea of putting in a congestion pricing system is just, it'll be negative, it'll be bad for our communities and bad for those areas of District 3.
All right, thank you so much. Danny.
I do support it. I think this has to be crafted with equity in mind. We have to think about low-income residents. We have to think about service workers, but I think we have to move forward with it. We have studied it. We also have studies in the form of success around the world where this has worked. And as we look at our Muni budget that looks to be hundreds of millions of dollars in deficit in the years to come, we have to think about congestion pricing as being a way to fill that gap. So I do support it.
All right. Aaron.
Thank you, Joe. Mr. Sauter and I agree. And as the chair of the Transportation Authority of San Francisco, I'm the one who has proposed the studies. We really want to hear robust public input. And for people who don't know what congestion pricing is, it's basically a fee to drive into the downtown core. This has been done in Singapore. This has been done in Stockholm. This has been done in London with great results. Obviously, we're in a very different environment right now because of COVID, where downtown is kind of a ghost town, but it will rebound. And I think this is exactly the right time to study it, to get public input, and to craft it. And at least one of my competitors and I agree on that.
Right, and just doing my hostly duties, it is one method to raise money for transit, but it's also a way to make sure that if people can choose transit, that they have a little more nudge to choose transit. Lulu, let's hear from you. 1 minute. Oh, sorry, you're still muted, Lulu. Lulu, you're still muted. Lulu?
Okay, I'm owed an apology. I did not characterize the boondoggle as Chinese. I said that the people of Chinatown do not want that station named after Rose Pack. That's all I said. I did not characterize it as Chinese boondoggle. I am not a racist, and I do not make ethnic characterizations. I live in Chinatown. My campaign manager is half Chinese, so I did not say that. I do think that a boondoggle involving ridiculous expenditures to create a subway out to the Presidio is absurd. I agree with it, Supervisor Peskin. Muni service is excellent in this area. We can keep the Muni service, but I'm owed an apology. I did not make any racist or ethnic characterization of that boondoggle. And by the way, I'll just leave it at that. I refuse to be characterized as a racist. I'm sorry, people. I refuse to be characterized as a racist.
I don't think anyone, Lou, and I'll just respond shortly, but then we'll go to closing statements. I don't think anyone used the word racist and called you a racist. I think what I was responding to was the terms Chinese boondoggle, which was the very
I did not say Chinese boondoggle. I said a boondoggle in Chinatown that goes all the way to the Presidio. I did not say Chinese boondoggle, and I will check the tape again tomorrow about this.
We can check the tape again tomorrow. If you check the tape again tomorrow and I misheard you, then I will, at that point, certainly apologize. Pardon me if I did mishear. All right, candidates, we're going to do closing statements. I'm going to do it I'm going to ask you to give your statements in the reverse order in which we had our fireside chats, which means, Spencer, we start with you and you get 2 minutes.
Yeah, so one of the things that I want to bring to City Hall as district supervisor is my background in low-income financing, legal aid, and legal services. I think bringing these perspectives to City Hall is critical. I think those knowledge and background in solving these issues is going to be critical moving forward, making sure that our communities are taken care of, making sure that our small businesses are taken care of, making sure that our neighborhoods are not only surviving after COVID, but thriving after COVID. That's really what I want to see, and that's kind of the tactic that I'm taking. We need to be looking at outcomes, the outcomes that we're having right now. I think people need to ask themselves, are they happy with the current outcomes of the current supervisor, Aaron Peskin? Are they happy with how their neighborhood is right now? Are they happy with the past 20 or so years of what they've seen from the supervisor and what he has or hasn't gotten done? So I think that's critical. I think it's critical that people look into some of those things, look into what Aaron Peskin has promised in the past, look into the fact that we don't have any completed NAV centers in District 3 and that we are just starting on a transitional age youth center. And so I hope that after everyone takes those into account, that I'll have their support this November. I hope to have your vote this November 3rd. And if you would like to know more about my campaign, about myself or my background, please go to votesimonsen.com.
All right. Finish early. Lulu, you've got 2 minutes. Please, by all means, your closing statements.
I apologize for getting so upset.
No worries.
I'm well aware, though. I have a background in linguistics, and I'm a journalist and author, and I'm very well aware of how language gets played with in this city. I said before, I want a vision. The vision is we can be European in the way we were when I was growing up, and that's not ethnic. We can be a city that spends money to support the owners of private housing that's historic and valuable. We can be a city that has world-class public housing. We can be a city that keeps our wonderful world-class muni. We can be a city with ethnically dedicated high schools. I've called for a Chinese language publicly funded high school and a Spanish language publicly funded high school. We need a vision. We need a vision of a society and a city in which conservative money and radical culture work together for the unity and the betterment of our community, because the word community has the word unity in it. I'm not going to sit here and talk about Aaron Peskin or even Mayor Breed or anybody else. I'm not here to logic chop or insult or crawl through the past. We need something new. We are in a disaster. We're in a catastrophe. The virus has left our city, a city that depends on tourism, on entertainment, and on the restaurant industry, prostrate. It's time to lift our city up. It's time to restore our business community. It's time to get people jobs. It's time to get our city working again. There are ways that this can be done. We need a plan. We need a vision. We need an understanding of what we can be. And we need to knock it off with the improvisation. Improvisation is great in comedy clubs. Improvisation is great in jazz music. Improvisation in San Francisco public policy has got to end. It's time for, like I keep saying, a vision, a long-range plan, and an understanding of how no bird flies with one wing. So what I'm saying, conservative money, radical culture for our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Aaron, 2 minutes, closing statements.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks once again to the host for convening this debate, and to all of you who are watching instead of watching the VP debate. And I also really want to thank the other candidates in this race, Ms. Schwartz, Mr. Simonsen, and Mr. Sauter. I think all four of us believe in the betterment of San Francisco and agree that we would all work to improve our society through the construction and preservation of affordable housing, and providing services to the unhoused and folks with behavioral health issues, as well as helping small businesses and our neighborhoods bounce back from the pandemic. And I'm very proud of the work that we've accomplished together during the pandemic over the past 5 years that I've been back in office, and over the 20 years of my public service. And I'm very motivated to continue that work and expand on that vision. And just look at this November's ballot, which my colleagues and I created and crafted to give San Francisco voters the opportunity to vote our values, from better cleaning our streets, which is Prop B, to addressing public corruption, which is also Prop B, to law enforcement reform in the forms of Prop D and E, allowing immigrants and young folks to have a voice at the ballot and on city commissions, which are Prop C and G, unlocking resources for the homeless and reforming our tax system to make it more fair and equitable, which is Prop F, as well as Prop I and Prop J. And I think the choice before you, all of us, is actually not so much about our differences on the issues, which I think in the broader context are relatively small. The choice before us and before you, and why I'm asking for your vote, is because in these extraordinary, unprecedented times, I really think we need elected leaders who have proven experience, knowledge, and skill to set us right and recover from the pandemic. And while I consider myself a progressive, I'm also a pragmatic legislator who clearly has shown that I'm capable of working across the aisle, which is why I'm endorsed by every single one of my colleagues on the board and our mayor. I look forward to serving you for another 4 years.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Sauter, we will end with you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to all the organizations who helped host tonight, and all those who waded through and heard all of us tonight. I'm in this race to do the hard work, to solve the hard problems that are holding our neighborhoods back from meeting their full potential, building more housing, cleaning up our streets, and making it easier for small businesses to open in all of our empty storefronts. And of course, this work will be hard, but that's exactly why we're doing it. Because I believe, and I know that all of us here believe, that these are neighborhoods worth fighting for, from Russian Hill to Nob Hill to Polk Gulch. That's the work I want to do. And of course, if you're looking for the most experience, the most endorsements, then I'm not your candidate. But I believe that this next 4 years is about vision, about a plan, and about putting priorities forward and actually solving these hard problems. We're so honored to have the endorsement of many organizations, including the Eastern Neighborhood Democratic Club, the San Francisco Renters Alliance, the Chinese American Democratic Club, the largest Democratic club in the city, the United Democratic Club. And this November, I hope to earn your vote as well. I invite everyone to learn a little bit more, see our plans on our website, DannyD3.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for having me. Again, I'm Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez, formerly of the San Francisco Examiner, now of KQED News, and proud born and raised San Franciscan. Thank you so much for having me. I'll turn it over to Drew.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was great. Thank you, candidates, for your time. Very interesting discussion. And thank you again to our hosts, Lower Polk Neighbors, Lower Polk Community Benefit District, Discover Polk Community Benefit District, and Russian Hill Neighbors. And thank you to all the attendees. And please don't forget to vote by November 3rd. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.